Welcome to the Asset Reliability at Work podcast.
Endless journey of delight and profitability.
I think some people use it as a derogatory term towards accountants.
Being visible to the employees is important.
Hi, Asset Reliability at Work podcast listeners. We're here today for part 2 of 3 with our in-person interview with Greg Flickinger. He's the chairman of the OpEx Leadership Network and Group Vice President Manufacturing Operations at HEB. Today, we're going to talk about how the Internet of Things, the industrial Internet of Things, is changing the way manufacturing professionals work and the role of a new technology. So in episode 1, we talked a lot about the OpEx Leadership Network, the problems that manufacturing and especially the CPG industry is facing. And now we're going to dive really into technology and trends. Woo-hoo. So, Greg, what are some of the ways in which you see that IIoT is changing the way your industry does business?
Well, what I would tell you is the biggest opportunity is it's creating an ability to not only collect more data, but really integrate that data and manage the analytics. So it's going to light up the opportunity. GE calls it the brilliant factory. Everybody has different names for it. But in the manufacturing space, it's the opportunity to really get deep into your data and analytics and really get to become much more proactive or really predictive than we are today. So to me, that's that holy grail of where we're heading. And that gets back to asset reliability, condition-based monitoring, all the way down to the quality of your product. And we can talk a little more about that later as well. But when I think about it, it's connectivity. So how do we connect better to our suppliers or our OEMs, the original equipment manufacturers? How can they provide remote monitoring? How can they help you optimize your asset? For instance, if we have someone in another state that provided our equipment or even overseas, they can patch in and they can see how our asset is running and really do some troubleshooting from over there without having to make a trip. So that's one piece of it. The other one that I really like to get to or think about is the digital twin concept. And so what that means is we're able to optimize our system by capturing the data and then creating this virtual twin or this virtual example of our real world asset. Then what we can do is use it for two things. One, we can use it to optimize our current assets. So we go through the routines of changing the performance within the virtual machine, and then we take those best parameters into the real world machine. Or if the real world machine is drifting, then the digital twin can kind of be compliant and check it, and then notify us not only what's wrong, but then potentially what we would need to do to fix it. So clearly, when it comes to that, to me, it opens the door for what I call system health. How do we get systems that we can, just like the health of us, if we go to the doctor's office, they check all our vital signs and we can tell if we have a temperature or not, and then they can help diagnose what's wrong with us. This gets us to the point where we can treat our assets or our machines just like that, and we can diagnose their system health. And eventually, when we get really good at it, then we have the potential to create self-healing systems that can then find there's something wrong with them, and then through different algorithms can potentially change the course to make sure that your end product continues to be of the highest quality.
Now, Greg, I want to transition and talk a little bit more specifically about this new technology inside manufacturing facilities. Now, I am definitely somebody who likes to have all of the smart devices in their house. We have the Nest for the thermometer. We have the iRobot to vacuum our house. We've got the health monitoring things like the iWatch. So we have a plethora of things in the house. So I definitely find the kind of new technology interesting, fascinating. And so I want to get your take on one of these new technologies for manufacturing more specifically, and that's the augmented wearables. And so tell me, have you seen this in action, and what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, clearly it's beginning to emerge. If you go back a number of years, we had Google Glass, and it came out and kind of ebbed and flowed and went away. But now they're really starting to emerge. There's companies like Vuzix, which we've begun to partner with in this technology, who are now developing wearables really industrial grade, simple, easy to use, small enough that you can fit comfortably on your face and double as safety glasses as well. But they're developing what I would call functional wearables. So those are now beginning to find opportunities, and we see that already in picking locations where you're picking product to ship, warehousing applications. It's already starting to find some use. I believe I saw an article on DHL was deploying this across their warehousing network. So we're seeing it in that space. I've also heard of a heating and air company in Nashville that is deploying it with all of their technicians in the field. And at this point, they're maybe not getting real-time data from someone, but they are using it to capture the work they're doing, and of course can document the work that's been done for both reliability's sake as well as making sure that the work is done to the right level. So those are some things I think about. But what I would tell you is really the vision that I have and the opportunity for Wearables is to really bring the data to the person in the field doing the work. Where if you think about historically, what have we done? We've brought people into our organization and we've spent months and oftentimes years teaching, educating, training, getting them really good at maintaining our equipment. And so a lot of the focus has been on practice and memorization. And what this opens up the opportunity to do is what I would call vertical onboarding of people. So now we can really focus on problem solving, basic mechanical skills, electrical skills, and programming skills. And maybe you or I have never worked on a particular asset, a bagger perhaps, vertical form, fill, seal. And now I can walk up as a technician and at my fingertips would be all the data that I need to troubleshoot. 1-point lessons, my work order could be displayed. It could walk me through step by step what to do. And then I think the bigger opportunity that comes along with that is if I get stuck, then I can basically press a button and patch into the equipment manufacturer, and then they can be there with me on the camera that's mounted, and in my earpiece, we can walk through it together.
Wow.
And so what could be better than to troubleshoot an asset and get lost and then go find the expert, the guy that actually built the equipment, and have him walk you through
in real time,
walk through troubleshooting that asset. So what do? We save money because of travel at the expense of the OEM or us as a company. And more importantly, I can get that asset up and running very, very quickly as long as I'm training to skill sets and I'm not training to knowledge anymore. Why should we memorize things, especially in today's day and age when equipment obsolescence happens? We look at our phones. You buy a new phone, next month it's obsolete. The same thing is happening across industry. The equipment is getting old and obsolete. So why would I want to memorize how to fix old equipment when new equipment's emerging? We need to bring the data to our teams. So that's what I think about, and I have one really, really cool example to share. It was about a month ago. I was walking through the Charlotte airport, and there was a blind individual, seeing eye dog, going through security. He got held up in security as they were searching his bags, and I noticed he had wearable glasses on. So I waited until he got through security and then approached him and asked him if I could ask him a few questions. Of course, he was trying to get to a flight, so I couldn't take too much of his time. But I just asked him, what are you using your wearables for? And what he talked to me about was that there was a person on the other end. Her name was Joanne, and she was looking through the camera. He had his earpiece in and real time instructing him how to get through the airport. So here he is navigating the Charlotte airport, trying to get to his gate, and there's a person on the other end that is basically his seeing eye dog, but now it's a human that can communicate with him and tell him, take 5 steps forward, bear to the left, you're heading to C gate. And so what a way to open up this person's capability to navigate the world. And I guess the thing that struck me was I looked at his dog and thought, well, in not so much time, that dog is now going to be promoted to pet, and no longer will he need to be seeing eye dog because
he'll be companion.
He'll be the companion pet. Wow. And I guess if I take it one step further, again, let's think out where it's going, and we start to put AI into this. Think of the day when you don't need Joanne on the other side, and you have the Google map effectively of the Charlotte airport. All of a sudden, this person can go into the Charlotte airport. AI is in the background giving him directions and gets him to the gate. He gets on his plane, flies to the location, just by voice activation, contacts Uber, goes out, gets in his Uber, and maybe the Uber car doesn't even have a person driving it, and gets to his destination. And effectively what we've done, again, through Wearables as the catalyst, is we've taken someone with impairment, being blind, and all of a sudden now they're just as functional as someone with their sight. So that's what excites me beyond manufacturing, but I saw it working just a month ago. And so that tells me that why aren't we deploying it in manufacturing if we can use it in that way?
And high school teachers that are trying to get kids to memorize things, beware. Why memorize?
All right, so Greg, you've been in a position as a plant manager, so I'm curious to get your take on, what are kind of the barriers to adopting these new technologies for individuals, such as the augmented reality wearables?
When I think about it, the biggest challenge is we have many times very tenured people in our organizations, and as we know, there's a lot of retirements coming. So the tenured people in the group, sometimes they have trouble adopting just because generally they're afraid of it. It's so new and it's so different, and it breaks that paradigm of what they've always done to be successful. So we really need to get them over that activation energy. And when I think about when it's been successful, is when we make a person's job easier. So if we can bring the technology to them, make it simple and make it work, we're not adding work to their job, but we're actually making their job easier, then everyone's going to adopt, including tenured workforce. If we flip it over and look at the younger generation coming in, of course, it's natural. That's just
They're
what they know.
expecting it.
You're right. They totally expect it. And if they show up and it's not there, they're going to wonder why. And then, of course, you maybe would have retention issues if you're not on the forefront because the expectation is, I need it because it makes my job easier. So, Derek, what I would tell you is it all comes down to, are we making this person's job easier, and are they adding more value? And if we do, of course they're going to grab it. They're going to grab it and run with it because it makes their job easier.
It's the benefit to them.
We got to benefit the person. And so in summary, when I think about wearables and technology in general, regardless whether it's manufacturing or any industry, everything we do begins, ends, and revolves around people. So when we think about technology, we shouldn't be deploying technology for the sake of technology. We need to deploy technology to make sure that we are making jobs more efficient, making jobs easier. And so if you want to really push and drive the culture change, that's the way to get it into the organization and make it be successful. Too often people throw technology out and add work or add complexity, and that's when you see it fail.
So I just heard 3 big keywords there. I heard focus on the people, and I heard, well, I'll summarize, provide benefits for them. And I did hear culture change. So how big of a role do you think culture change plays in everything that we've been talking about so far?
Culture is everything, because when we talk about people, we're talking about culture, we're talking about paradigms, we're talking about the way people work. And the key is, instead of, and even when I put in a new system, whether it's a physical system, a software system, or wearable technology, what we need to do is make sure, again, we're making people's jobs easier. But the key is, it needs to be the vehicle for culture change. So whatever that process is, if we're using it as the mode to change our culture, and as a result, we get performance. Too often we put technology in and we're trying to go get performance, and we forget about people, we forget about the culture. But if we think about it very differently and ask ourselves a different question, and if we use that technology to move our culture to a different place, to move to a higher level of engagement, to get greater contribution, and as a result, more pride in people's work, they feel more dignity in what they do, then that technology now is the vehicle for culture change, and performance is the outcome.
So maybe instead of FMEAs for the people side change, we should have the PMEAs or the CCMEAs, where we're doing instead of the mode of failure, we're doing what's the mode of culture change, and then what kind of effects we want, how do we get there? Who knows? Maybe it's a thought. Well, I think that wraps up our episode 2 questions for today. Everybody stay tuned for episode 3. Our final episode with Greg, while he's here for the Executive Leadership Summit, is about boosting employee engagement through training. Yep. So I'm Tara Holwegner, and with me
is Derek Kelly. And don't forget to visit our show notes, as we always have helpful links as it relates to the topic discussed in this episode. So once again, thank you for joining us on the Asset Reliability at Work podcast. Hey listeners, one more thing before you go. If you have any feedback for the show, or you have maybe some suggestions for upcoming topics you'd love to hear about, we'd like to hear from you. So there's 2 ways to get in contact with us. The first is on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @LCE_today, so be sure to follow us. And then the other way is to email the show at podcast@lce.com. Once again, thank you for joining the show, and we look forward to more episodes on the Asset Reliability at Work podcast.